Welcome to Ask the Experts. I'm Jill Schlesinger, editor-at-large of CBS MoneyWatch. I'm joined by
Jack Otter, executive editor of CBS MoneyWatch.
with a special guest star.
The brains of the group.
The brains of the group from the left coast. We've got Mark Thoma, who is a macroeconomics dude at University of Oregon. And, you know, Mark, the best thing I can say about you is that you're a MoneyWatch blogger. I mean, I know you've got a PhD and you've done all sorts of research, but you're on the team and you're ours. So when things are going crazy in Europe, we've got to turn to the guy who really understands this. So, first of all, let's just talk a little bit about where we stand in the European crisis as Frau Merkel and her counterpart, Mr. Sarkozy, prepare and get psyched up for Brussels. Are you feeling upbeat about what could come out of the last EU summit of the year on Friday, Mark?
I'm thinking they might take some steps to solve the problem. There's two big problems they need to address right now. The first is how to get future debts in Europe under control. And it's looking like they're going to try to change the treaty, make it so that nations can only take no more than 60% GDP ratio, those sorts of things. So they're going to try to take some tough steps to get future debts under control, and hopefully that'll give financial markets a lot of confidence. The other big problem that they have to address is how to divide up the current losses that they're going to have in the countries that are in trouble. Who's going to pay for it? It's going to be the taxpayers of the country, the people who lent them the money. We're going to share it across the European Union. And those are the two biggest problems they face right now. They'll need to get straight tomorrow at the conference.
And let me ask you something, because in this first meeting that took place in Paris, it appeared that Frau Merkel said something that I thought was kind of amazing when she said maybe the bondholders are not going to take a haircut going forward, meaning that the folks who are lending money in this next round are not going to suffer if things go south. I thought that was kind of interesting, right? Yeah,
they're worried about a Lehman event where if they take haircuts for the bondholders, they'll start withdrawing their money from financial markets. They'll end up with a liquidity event and all those sorts of problems. But you're also going to end up with a situation like they did in Ireland. If they pursue that strategy to protect the bondholders, what you do is you transfer all the losses to the taxpayers. And the taxpayers of the individual countries are going to end up taking huge losses and incurring the whole debt. And so that's really the trade-off they're facing right now.
And frankly, if you're going to make taxpayers absorb all the losses, you're not going to get reelected, right?
That's exactly right. And so the political problems, that's what I was saying earlier, you know, they're going to have this conference tomorrow, but the political problems are going to be tough to overcome.
And do you find it interesting that they always start with dinner when it comes to a European conference? Or is that to be, you know...
Probably late dinner at that, right?
Exactly. Let's start with a late dinner and they'll have some wine, right, Jack?
Absolutely, yeah. Maybe that'll smooth the conversation.
Yeah, that works.
So, Jack, if we didn't have the European debt bomb ticking beneath us, do you think the stock market wants to go higher? I mean, we ended up a little marginally higher today, not a lot, but do you think that we'd be higher than where we are today?
Well, given the rule that the stock market predicts, 6 months ahead, roughly, yeah, I think that the green shoots are actually real now. I think they could easily get stomped by a European giant and many other problems. I'm not being overly optimistic, but yeah, I think that if you just read what's happening in this economy, what the numbers are looking like, you'd have to say, yes, it looks like we will very slowly, way too slowly, come out of these doldrums, and so the market would be moving higher.
And Mark, what do you think? Do you think that that without the sort of the specter of Europe looming, that the economy would be growing in a more robust fashion? I mean, we've been in this slow growth stage for a while. Is it really affecting, let's say, a multinational company willingness to hire or not?
I think it is affecting confidence. If you look at the correlation between U.S. GDP and European GDP, it's extraordinarily high. And so whatever happens in Europe is going to affect the U.S. And so as companies look forward and say, how confident can I be about the future, they're going to look forward and worry about Europe, and that's going to hold back production. And so I think it does have an effect on U.S. decisions right now, and growth would be higher if Europe was doing better.
You know, one interesting dynamic is that because of all the problems in Europe, the number of sort of risk-free assets you can buy in the world has gone down a lot. No longer is sovereign debt in Europe considered risk-free, so people are throwing more money into U.S. Treasuries, which is helping to keep interest rates down in this country, making stocks more attractive, bonds less attractive, and making it easier, cheaper at least, to borrow money. Not easier, but cheaper to borrow money. So in some ways, I guess the European turmoil could be helping us, at least if you're refinancing a mortgage.
Yeah.
As long as you don't rely on that too much, and then there's a sudden reversal of confidence where the money dries up, and then you could end up, if you're relying on it, suddenly find yourself without a source of funds and scrambling domestically, and interest rates will go up fast. So I don't think you want to rely on that too much, but you're exactly right. It's helping a lot presently.
And we just got, actually just got a consumer credit came out with the Fed just came out and said that Americans, miraculously, are starting to borrow again. Mark, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's showing a little confidence. I think it's a good thing in that sense. We certainly don't want consumers to get themselves into debt trouble again. We want them taking healthy debt, buying houses when they can afford it, buying cars when they can afford it, those sorts of things. So in the sense that it's healthy debt, I think it's a good idea. If it's being driven by the fact that people don't have jobs, they don't have wages, and they're taking out debt simply to cover the things they can't cover with their standard income, then it's a bad thing. So you really need to know the source of the change before you can comment on whether it's good or bad. But I think it's probably showing confidence.
And would you say that given total debt levels here in the United States on the consumer side of it, that we're in okay shape, or are you satisfied with it, or do we have a ways to go?
We still have some deleveraging to do, and in that sense, the news is bad. If it's showing more confidence, it's good. You know, consumers are buying more stuff, but there's some deleveraging to do. There's still a lot of household debt from credit cards and student loans and all those sorts of things, and mortgage credit that they need to get rid of. And that process isn't over yet. And until it's over, we're going to struggle as an economy.
And I don't want to delve into the political, but I know you love politics, so I'm gonna bait you a little bit. Okay. So tell everybody who's watching here why Europe is not necessarily the model of what's happening in the United States, because we have the debt and the deficit conversation going on. We're kicking off this big political season, and I know you're already, you know what, you're grimacing right now. You're grimacing now as I tell you this. So, so many people will say to me, oh, when I talk about this on the radio or on TV, they say, oh, you know what, we're just like Europe. Mark, it's your turn, baby. Tell them we're not just like Europe.
We're not just like Europe. For one thing, we have a central authority. We don't have a bunch of independent states fighting against each other. We already have a federal government that coordinate Texas and Oregon, who have vastly different preferences in the world. And so we don't have the same political problems they have. We can tax and transfer money from one jurisdiction to another. But the source of the debt is quite a bit different. The main source of our debt is two things: the Bush tax cuts and the recession. The source of the debt in Europe, it depends on the country you look at, but the crisis is part of it, but also the larger social programs we have in Europe is also part of it, particularly in countries like Greece. And so the source of our debt is very different, the burden of our debt is very different, and our ability to control that debt is very different. So I'm much more confident with our ability to deal with the debt than I am with some of the countries in Europe.
As long as we're talking about this, we also have a printing press, which is very helpful. But, of course, Jim Grant is freaking out because tomorrow, which in Jim Grant's world is 10 years from now, we're going to have really bad inflation. What are your thoughts on that, Mark?
I think the Fed, the worry is, one is too many, 100 is not enough. So the minute you allow a little bit of inflation, you just can't stop going, and inflation is just going to go out of control. I think a little bit of inflation would help us. It would help Europe if the ECB would do the same thing. And that the Fed could actually enhance its credibility by letting inflation drift above target for a period of time, and then showing the world that that's not a disaster, that it can go to 3-4% in the short run through more aggressive policies and back it back down to 2% when things get better, that it doesn't lead to disaster the way some of the inflation hawks on the committees are thinking. And so I'm very much in disagreement with the hawkish elements of the committee. I think the Fed needs to do more, and I think they have the credibility and the tools they need to make sure that inflation is not a problem down the road.
Now, why is the ECB so freaked out about inflation? I mean, I'm a simple gal. Remember, I started as a commodities trader, so don't go too PhD on me. But in my world, I look at that situation and I say, Europe's probably in a recession in the fourth quarter, whatever, 0 to minus something, right? there is so much deleveraging that's going to happen. How is that not deflationary?
I think it is, and I think the ECB really needs. I think the fear of inflation in Europe is misplaced. There's a different history. So they have Hungary, they have Germany, they remember what happened with the massive hyperinflations in their past. To steal a line from someone, there must be a textbook in Germany somewhere that just talks about how the horrors of inflation, because everyone in Germany just seems to treat inflation like the biggest horror in the world.
Right, it's like inflation equals Nazis.
Exactly.
Automatically. It's the weirdest thing.
And so I think that explains a lot of the difference. You know, one reason why the ECB has what we call a pure inflation target. They only care about inflation. They don't target output. In the U.S., we have what's called a dual target. We target both. One of the reasons for that is their history is different. They're much more concerned with inflation. But another is the fact that whose GDP would you target?
Right.
Target Germany's or who exactly? And so they have that kind of a problem. But so it's a different history in the fact they have no fiscal union that makes them pay much more attention to inflation than other sorts of problems.
You know, to your point about no fiscal union, what do you see as the long term? You know, however we get through this crisis or don't, whatever happens, to me, I can't imagine countries giving up sovereignty. I mean, I don't think it's ever happened in the history of the world, giving up sovereignty enough to let another nation or another group of nations decide their economic policy. And obviously, with economies as disparate as you have in the European Union, can the euro really succeed, do you think, 10 years from now?
It's going to be a tough problem. It's exactly the problem you're talking about. It's apparent that you have to have some sort of fiscal controls, but you can't do that without a central authority. You have the situation where one country can take actions that affect another country, and there's no way to sort of bring what we call those externalities into the marketplace. And without a central authority to sort of adjudicate those sorts of things, you're never going to get anywhere. But France, are they going to give up their sovereignty? I don't think so. I mean, it's going to be tough. And so you've got this political problem and an economic problem working against each other, and I think it's on the fence on which one will be the more important. Will the economic problem allow us to get a fiscal union, or will the politics stop it? Right now, I'm fairly confident, but 10 years from now, I really don't know. I think it's going to be tough.
Oh, I like that, because all those Europeans who were kind of boasting and saying they were kicking our asses, now it's kind of good because we have a little bit of schadenfreude, to borrow the German phrase. Mark, if we get something that disappoints on Friday, if they come out and they say, we tried, we really tried, and we have some stuff, but it's going to dribble out, what will the impact be on our markets immediately on Friday? What's our downside?
Watch interest rate spreads, the spread between the safe and the risky assets for those countries. If the amount that those countries have to pay to service their debt starts going back up because of a lack of confidence, then we're all in trouble, and it's looking like a crisis. And again, if there's a crisis in Europe, it's going to hamper our recovery here. It's going to make it much more difficult for us to get back to full employment. And we're already having enough trouble as it is. And so I don't want to see frowny faces tomorrow, to borrow a phrase.
I like that. Well, you know, I want there to be something that happens that's good, that at least gets them on the path to, you know, restoring confidence in the world. And then if they need to get divorced in 10 years, I'm okay with that. But let's wait till the kids get out of school, right?
I think that's exactly right. Let's do it for the kids. I think
right, exactly.
I think it's a great motto we can start pushing here.
And Mark, when you look at, you know, kind of the raw numbers here in the U.S., we got a decent headline out of the jobs report. I know both you and I in our blogs both were Debbie Downers and said, let me point out all the horrible things that are inside there. But as someone wrote to me, there is some trend improvement, that 130,000 jobs a month isn't chopped liver, and that, yeah, we want it to be 200, and yes, there's a whole heck of a lot of people that are unemployed. But Jack, you've also made this point that we are in such a big hole, and this was sort of like this kind of weird steroid-juiced economy previously, that this is what we should have expected all along. So is the growth in line with expectations, both GDP growth, the total economy, and crawling out of the jobs hole?
To me?
Yes, you, sir.
Sorry about that. I thought you were asking Jack. Right now, at turning points, job growth is always slow. And so the question is whether we're going to continue to just keep up with population growth, maybe do a little bit better than that and have a 10-year recovery of labor markets, or whether we'll eventually turn around and accelerate and get the 200, 300, 400,000 jobs a month we need to really re-employ all the unemployed people. That's where Europe is so important to the U.S. recovery, and what happens tomorrow is so important. We're not going to get that acceleration in jobs if the troubles in Europe persist. And we may not get it anyway, but we certainly won't, or almost certainly won't, if Europe continues to have troubles. And so I really want to see, it's true that we see green shoots, but we need some acceleration. We need some fertilizer. We need some nitrogen on those green shoots to really go in. And I'm not sure I see where that's coming from just yet.
And Jack, are there, it's a political year coming up. That means a whole lot of nothing, right?
A whole lot of nothing. I mean, on the one hand, some people cheer stalemate because if tax cuts expire, I mean, you and I have made the case why we think a payroll tax actually could be stimulative, even if it's probably not the most efficient stimulus, but it could be stimulative. But the point is, if you let all these tax cuts expire, at least the deficit gap will be closed a little bit. And should that trigger happen where spending is cut, I think that could harm our growth, and you can certainly debate whether massive defense cuts are really a good idea, but the point is, you let taxes go up, you have spending automatically go down, you will see at least the deficit gap closing a bit. One of the Debbie Downer points that we haven't mentioned, although I guess we've referred to it, is but deleveraging. So if you talked about people borrowing again in this country, I think that kind of is against the global trend. Certainly governments are going to have to figure out a way to deleverage, borrow less money. And when you see everyone doing that, yeah, it's good in the long term. It's just like the paradox of thrift. If a family saves money, we know that's good for them, but if everyone saves money at the same time, then their businesses can't sell anything, and so they can't hire people. So I think that's another problem that's going to slow down global growth for a while, was after borrowing so much for so long, we're going to have to pay some of those loans back, and that is a good recipe for slow growth.
Hey, Mark, everybody always wants to know, like people watching this, they're saying, okay, you know what, guys? You're bringing me down. When is this going to be over? Now, I know that there's, I know, look at the raised eyebrows. I like that I can get you to raise your eyebrows. But, there's research that says these bubbles that are fueled with credit bubbles take longer. All right, so let's say that, can we start counting at when? 2000, the end, we can start counting the beginning of 2008 as the beginning of the process?
Maybe 7, yeah.
Maybe 7, right? The top of the housing market was 6, but let's say 7-ish. I'm counting 7. I want an extra year. How many years?
Reinhardt and Rogoff would tell us typically it's about 10 years. You get a lost decade when you have a major financial collapse. I don't think that's baked into the cake. If you do better policies than other countries have done in response to, we haven't yet, but if you were to do better policies, then I don't think you have to suffer a 10-year recession. If you repair balance sheets for households, do some of the things we haven't done, I think you can get out of these things quicker. But typically they take a long, long time, and they take longer if places like Europe explode.
And it's kind of neat, and I don't mean neat in neato, I mean neat in fits nicely in this box. The great bull market from 1982 to 1999 was 17 years. Things fell apart in 2000, 17 years from 2000, 2017, 10 years from 2007, 2017. So,
all right, so we got to get new rally caps printed up. 2017, get ready.
Exactly, yeah.
Are you feeling confident about the Oregon Ducks?
Yes.
All right, just wanted to make sure.
There's some good news.
Mark, before we let you go, just 1 minute on politics here and the economy. A lot of people vote with their pocketbooks, obviously, and even if the unemployment rate is at 8% at the time of the election, do you think that that's a absolutely no way President Obama gets reelected, or do you think that because of what we've come out of it, it is really different this time?
The political science suggests that it's the rate of change more than the level of the unemployment that matters. And so it's been changing a lot during that last year. A high level won't matter because people will be confident about the future. If it's even at a relatively, 7.8, but it's just been stuck there for a while, then people are much more nervous. So I'm looking more at the rate of change than the level, and there's some hope there.
All right. And Jack, any last thoughts for before we let Mark go, before we start doing our answering of the questions?
No, I guess we might, if we have some stumpers, we might have to throw them to Mark. But otherwise, no, I thought it's been very interesting what he's
Mark, you're always the best. So first of all, How many economists can speak English? I think very few. Oh, I know. I should have wished you a happy anniversary because it was, just recently the 15th anniversary of your favorite person, Alan Greenspan's irrational exuberance speech. So I know how much you love him, she says, dripping with sarcasm. And by the way, could you just grade Ben Bernanke right now as a Fed chief? Your opinion. Use your regular old A, B, C, D, E, F.
He's done well, but not perfect. So I'm in the B range, B plus range, somewhere in there.
No grade inflation in Oregon, right?
We've had committees to try to stop it, but I can't guarantee there's none.
And who do you want to be the next place? Do you want that next place on the Fed? You want to be a Fed governor?
Oh, sure. I'd do it.
Should we start a write-in campaign?
That would be fine with me.
All right. Mark, thank you so much. It's Mark Thoma, and you can check out his blog on CBS MoneyWatch. And Mark, will let you go as we start to answer some of the exciting questions that come in from our listeners and viewers. And thanks again for participating. It really was. I always learn something when you're here, so thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So, Jack, we've got some questions here that we got to field, but because who wants to, when I want to get back to the mundane, people care about their lives.
Absolutely.
So one of the things...
The esoteric, not the mundane. We were in esoteric land now.
We were in esoteric, we were in macro land.
Yeah, macro
Okay,
land.
let's go to macro land. Take a deep breath, everyone. We're coming out of macro land, and we're going to answer your questions. Now, every single week we answer your questions. You can send us an email, ask the experts. Is that right? Ask the experts at moneywatch.com. I'm asking our excellent producer, Megan, about that. So let's do a quickies here. We've got Andy, whose wife has a lump sum payment from a retirement plan that's being closed out, about $1,000. Andy would like to roll over the lump sum to another tax shelter, her current Vanguard IRA, or something else. What would be your advice for this small amount and how it should be invested?
Sure. First of all, I don't like having too many accounts. I think it's easy to lose track of them, to forget what you've got invested where. So with $1,000, I definitely would not open up a new account. Vanguard IRA sounds great. We have Alan Roth on MoneyWatch.com who's beating the table for the Vanguard Total Market Index Fund, or the new Vanguard, I don't know I think it's VTI maybe, an ETF that invests in stocks all around the globe, and it includes a little bit of emerging markets exposure, which is actually a new thing for these ETFs. So
how about the target date? Let's say that Andy's wife has a couple $1,000s in the IRA, adding $1,000. Are you in favor of the target date funds? A lot of people see these, in your 401k accounts. They have the date when you're planning on retiring.
If you don't want to be a hands-on investor, I think they're great. I mean, what I say about target date funds is there might be a few better ways to invest, but there are millions of worse ways to invest. So absolutely, a target date fund is a good plan.
Got a couple of CD questions. So, as you noted, with all of the craziness around the globe, interest rates are so low, penalizing savers, which are the MoneyWatch types of people, for goodness sakes. Marjorie says that her CDs are coming due, and they were getting, get this, 4.8%.
Oh, wow, good for her.
Ow, that hurts. Yeah. Is there any investment I can make now for the next 3 to 5 years to get something comparable without too much risk? Marjorie, no. You're screwed, kind of. I mean, the problem is that interest rates are really low. So you can ladder some CDs if you would like, and you could even, if you want no risk, you can maybe sort of check out some other interest-bearing types of accounts, but they will have a tiny bit more risk, and maybe that's, I wouldn't say bond funds, but maybe a little bit of dividend-paying stocks. But for no risk, she's beat, right?
Yeah, I mean, for a little bit of risk, something like the Vanguard short-term bond fund, you could see some fluctuation in value there. But if it's really a 5-year horizon, think of that as a 3-year more or less investment. You can also go farther than 5 years in your CDs if the penalty isn't too steep. So look for a 7-year CD, a 10-year CD. You might be better off even if you have to withdraw early and pay a few months worth of interest penalty. That's better than you'd get in, say, a 2 or 3 year CD.
And you can also check out, Alan Roth does have a really good post on this, the best place to stash your cash. So he's always monitoring that. It's a very good place to be.
But we sympathize. Moment of sympathy because, yes, for CD investors, it's really rough right now. The only good news we can offer them is you're better off getting 1% in what, a 2% inflation world than you would be getting 5% in an 8% inflation world. You know, at least your real return is positive.
Really, like, that's the comparison. Like, as my father would say, those are my only choices, but I guess right now they are. Karen would like to know, what is the best way to invest more than $80,000 to generate income for retirement? I've got a low risk tolerance here. So, Jack, let's start. She says that she's heard fixed annuities are a possibility. I'm not a fan of fixed annuities in this current environment because interest rates are too low and you're locking your money away. What else do you think, you know, sort of creating her own little income generator?
Sure, it's rough. I mean, I don't know if that's her. Let's, for the sake of argument, I guess let's call that her total nest egg.
Yep.
And do we know an age? Do we have a rough age here?
Let's pretend she's nearing retirement. Let's say she's 55-ish.
So I guess I'd come up with an asset allocation where you've got some riskier assets that are going to keep up, maybe beat inflation, because if you have a 30-year lifetime horizon, you can't just go all safe. So if we said maybe put 30% of it in stocks, again, thinking you're not going to touch that money for 10, 15 years, and then that leaves 70% for fixed income, I guess. You know, today I spoke to someone from Schwab who emphasized the importance of 1 year cash. So figure out what your living needs are for 1 year, and that's only going to go in a 1 year CD or even just a money market fund or something, so it's always available. And then, yeah, look at the short-term bond index, like the Vanguard short-term bond index. You have to keep the fees low because your return is so tiny. If you're in say a bond fund that charges, you know, half a percentage point, 0.6 tenths of 60 basis points or 0.6 of a percentage point, that could be half your return right there. So you got to keep the cost really low. I guess
the answer is
dividend-bearing stocks, but you know that's risky.
Right.
Dividend-paying stocks.
What you really need to do is not retire. You need to work longer and you need to spend less. I mean,
she doesn't want to hear that.
I understand that. I mean, but that's like, but the reality is, if you're looking to say like, okay, what's my 80 grand going to get me? You know, you're going to get $3 grand a year from that. That's what you're going to get. And so it's Megan's telling me to sit up because I'm squishing down. Sorry, Sally and Megan, the producing staff here. I think that this is a very good illustration of how it is so important to build up that nest egg. It is far more important, actually, to be a very good saver than a very good investor. You could be kind of an average investor. Who cares? Don't worry about it. But if you're a really good saver, oh my God, you'll knock it out of the park. You really will. Yeah. So saving more early on is totally the key. And for people who are listening and saying like, you idiot, how can I save anything? I can't save anything. I'm working paycheck to paycheck. I know. Okay? Like, I get there's a whole bunch of people like that. But if you have the ability to save, that is going to get you out of a lot of jams. And to your point about keeping 1 year in cash, so important because we just found out last week the average duration of unemployment is 40.9 weeks. So, you know, almost 41 weeks you're going to have to cover yourself. You better be prepared for that, because if things go south in the economy and people are rift again, have reductions in forces, and things start to go a little bit in a bad direction, you got to have that money available. All right, you ready for your last question?
All right, let's hear it.
I can't make this the last question. I have to do it this way. Here's your last question from Rich. What's an ETF? What are the advantages and disadvantages of investing in them?
We love this. Okay.
Okay. Better than is Apple a good investment?
Oh, that's good. That's good. We could talk about that.
Weave that in, because that's what's Brenda's question. But weave that one in.
Well, first of all, ETFs should be a larger portion of your portfolio than Apple stock or any other stock for that matter. ETFs are exchange-traded funds, is what it stands for, and they're a basket of stocks, a lot like a mutual fund. Really, the main difference is that you sell them on an exchange rather than a mutual fund, which when you sell, it actually goes back to the mutual fund at the end of the day. You don't trade it with anyone else. An exchange-traded fund are traded like stocks all day long. That gives you the ability, and you'll hear this from the marketers and in the advertisements, you can sell it any time of day as soon as you want. And I don't really think that's a big advantage, because people who try to do that will end up doing it at the wrong time. The advantages are that their expense ratios tend to be a little bit lower. You don't pay any capital gains tax if you don't sell. So even if it does really well, you won't get a tax bill.
As long as it's an index. Right.
Right.
Because the managed ones will pop out a little capital gains if you're not careful.
Sure. Okay, that's
true. But
true.
we're not going to let people use those. You're not going to use those, are you? No.
And ETFs are hot right now. People buy ETFs just because they're ETFs and they're the cool investment of the moment. And we really try to push people away from that. Think about what your investment goals are. What do I need? Do I need stocks? Do I need bonds? Do I need commodities? And then find the best way to get into them. So I'm agnostic whether it's a mutual fund or an ETF. Figure out what you need and then say, oh, what is the best way to do that? I think Jill is a little bit more of a fan of ETFs.
Oh, I like ETFs if you've got a boatload of money. I do not like ETFs if you are putting small dollars to work every month. They are expensive, actually. So if you are a small investor, it's not particularly a great thing to say, oh, I'm putting $50 a month into 4 different ETFs, and because you pay a brokerage charge every single time, a transaction fee. If you are a smaller investor, stick to the no-load mutual fund universe. It's going to be far better for you. I like ETFs as long as they are in the plain vanilla ETFs. Get into these leveraged or managed ETFs. You're asking for trouble. Go, do it. I dare you. You're going to get in trouble. I promise you. And to Mr. Apple stock, I would say this. You could buy your Apple stock, and someone is going to tell you it's a good buy, someone's going to tell you it's a bad buy. But what I can tell you is if you take that same money and go to your local casino, at least you'll get a drink for that risk. So, individual stocks are tough. I want to believe that there are people who are brilliant at it, at picking the best. But you know what? We are not Warren Buffett. Okay, let's be honest. And even if you buy what you know, you can get into a lot. I love my Apple product. You can buy it at the wrong time. You can get freaked out. You don't have as much money as Warren Buffett to stick with a trade. So I'm very concerned when people start buying individual stocks when they kind of don't know what they're doing. And even when they know what they're doing, they don't usually beat the index. So what's the point?
And the important point is that people think because Apple products are so great, therefore it's a good stock. Not necessarily. It might be. It could be that corporate IT departments are going to realize the error of their ways in using Windows all these years. They're all going to buy Apple products, and Apple will end up looking cheap today. Or it could be that a stock that has gone straight up for 3 years in a row at about 3 times the rate of the market is somewhere near its peak. You just don't know.
Or if you think that you can actually manage a portfolio of individual stocks, they're not all going to be winners because you've got to have a diversified you got to have 12, 15, 20 stocks to have a diversified portfolio, and you don't know what you're doing. Let's be honest, you don't know what you're doing. I mean, you don't. Come on.
It's tough, Jill.
I'm just saying you don't know that even the people who do this for a living, that not Warren Buffett, he doesn't have the deep bench, but most people who are doing this have a deep bench of analysts, people crunching numbers. You're going to compete with those people. And those people don't even beat the index.
Yeah, usually they don't beat the index.
So you know what? Keep it simple. I had a teacher who taught us derivatives. We were learning how to trade options way back when, and he wrote KISS on the board, and all these math heads that I was with said, what formula is that? And I raised my hand and said, keep it simple, stupid. He goes, exactly. That is a great mantra for us to end on. Try to keep your financial life stupid. No, I'm just saying, keep it simple, stupid. And if you really run into a problem, then seek advice. There are some people, Jack, who just can't do this on their own. It's quite emotional.
Absolutely.
So go get yourself some help. If you need help from us, send us an email, asktheexperts@moneywatch.com. And I think we're going to wrap it up now. What do you think?
I'll just throw in, when you do get that advice, don't get advice from somebody who is paid to sell you one product over another, because that's not going to help you. Find somebody who is paid simply to give out advice and makes no commissions.
We're going to talk about that in the next show.
Okay.
That'll be a good one. We want to thank Mark Thoma from MoneyWatch. I was about to say his own thing, but he also blogs daily at Economist View. I subscribe to that feed. I love it. It's very wonky sometimes. It's kind of fun. There's economists have little wars, which is amazing to watch from afar. And catch him here at CBS MoneyWatch. And Mark, thank you again for joining us. Jack?
It's a pleasure.
It's like the whole brand new Ask the Experts revved up, rocking and ready to go, right?
And you know what? There could be some drinking in the next Ask the Experts.
Oh, holiday gift guide coming up very shortly here on Ask the Experts.
I'm going to have to get on that. Yeah.
Yes, you are. And thank you all for watching. And please let us know what you think. And if there's topics that you're interested in, also shoot us an email. Love to hear from you. Thanks for watching.